Hello, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. One of these days I will get it down pat again. Believe it or not, I used to be really good at this. But it's kind of funny because I found out about a federal. I'm going to wait a second actually and see if the notification goes out. My first one, I sort of made a mistake when I set up the live instead of listing it as a public live so people would actually know. I set it up as a private because I wanted to practice sharing the video from my phone without getting disconnected. So when I went to go live, when I figured out how to do it, it wasn't sending the notification out. So I had to create a new live stream. So if you're watching on this link, sorry about the last one. It's trial and error. You know me. I'm no ITT tech. So I don't know how many people will even get the notification for this. I hope I set this one up properly. Sorry, you guys. It's very difficult when you do lives on your phone. It's very different than the computer setup. So I had to practice playing around with being able to share this live press conference today because it's a pretty big friggin' deal. So I heard about actually a few days ago. I sent to my friends a couple of links saying that the feds were investigating people for the actor Matthew Perry's death, and I was like, "What the hell's going on?" Because I hadn't heard anything about it until a couple of days ago. Well, today there was a press conference that was held by authorities, and they announced the indictment of 5 defendants that are being charged um, with situations regarding the actor Matthew Perry's death. So, kind of like the MJ case, he was seeking. It was no secret that he had substance abuse issues. He wrote a book, a tell-all, which ironically was published not long before he died. It's almost like he knew. And he had said that during his, lifetime, he had spent between $7 and $9 million in rehabilitation, trying to get off of his substance abuse. So right now, I'm just going to share with you guys the press conference from today. I hope this works, you guys. I don't think it is. It was working when I wasn't live. Oh, and not the way. Hang on, I'm trying to figure out why it has no sound. Just a minute. Let's see here. Let's try this. Can you guys see that on my screen? I don't know why we can't hear it suddenly, though. Sorry, you guys. I thought I had this all figured out. But you know me. No ITT tech. Hang on.
My name is Martin Estrada. I'm the United States Attorney based in Los Angeles. We're here today with our law enforcement partners to announce federal criminal charges related to the death of the actor Matthew Perry. Following Mr. Perry's death in October of last year, law enforcement, my office, and our partners represented on this stage began an in-depth, wide-ranging investigation. That investigation has revealed a broad, underground criminal network responsible for distributing large quantities of ketamine to Mr. Perry and others. This network included a live-in assistant, various go-betweens, 2 medical doctors, and a major source of drug supply known as, quote, the ketamine queen. We charged 5 defendants in this matter. These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways. In the end, these defendants were more. I'm going to talk about the indictment, the allegations, and the charges in more detail. On October 28, 2023, Mr. Perry was found deceased in his home. An autopsy was conducted following his death. That autopsy showed that he had died due to the acute effects of ketamine. Ketamine is a controlled substance. It has some legitimate uses, but it is also used illegally. It is used by people seeking to disassociate from reality. It can cause serious health effects, serious health problems, including loss of consciousness, including spikes in blood pressure, and including respiratory issues that can deprive the brain of oxygen. For that reason, it is a drug that must be administered by medical professionals, and the patient must be monitored closely. That did not occur here. This investigation focused on who supplied the ketamine to Mr. Perry. As many of you know, Mr. Perry struggled with addiction in the past. And on many occasions, he sought help for his addiction issues. The investigation revealed that in the fall of 2023, Mr. Perry fell back into addiction, and these defendants took advantage to profit for themselves. The 2 lead defendants in this case are defendants Salvador Plasencia and defendant Jasvin Sanya. First, I'll talk about defendant Plasencia. Defendant Plasencia was a medical doctor. He worked with another medical doctor, defendant Mark Chavez, to obtain ketamine. He then worked with Mr. Perry's live-in assistant, defendant Kenneth Iwamasa, to distribute that ketamine to Mr. Perry. Over 2 months, from September to October 2023, they distributed approximately 20 vials of ketamine to Mr. Perry in exchange for $55,000 in cash. Defendant Plasencia saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. He wrote in a text message in September 2023, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." He also stated in text messages that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's sole source of supply. He wrote in a text message that he wanted to be Mr. Perry's, quote, "go-to for drugs." As a doctor, defendant Plasencia knew full well the danger of what he was doing. In fact, on one occasion, he injected Mr. Perry with ketamine, and he saw Mr. Perry freeze up and his blood pressure spike. Despite that, he left additional vials of ketamine for defendant Iwamasa to administer to Mr. Perry. Of course, defendant Iwamasa had no medical training to speak of. Defendant Plasencia knew what he was doing was harming Mr. Perry. He had spoken to another patient in mid-October 2023, and he told that patient that Mr. Perry was spiraling out of control with his addiction. Nonetheless, defendant Plasencia continued to offer ketamine to Mr. Perry. Likewise, defendant Sanya knew what she was doing was harming defendants and also Mr. Perry. She took advantage of Mr. Perry by selling large amounts of ketamine to Mr. Perry over a 2-week period in October of 2023. She sold approximately 50 vials of ketamine for approximately $11,000 in cash. She worked with a broker, defendant Eric Fleming, and also the live-in assistant, defendant Iwamasa, to distribute this ketamine. Sonia and the broker, defendant Fleming, saw this as an opportunity to profit off of Mr. Perry. In a text message, the broker wrote, quote, "I wouldn't do it if there wasn't a chance of me making some money for doing this." Defendant Sonia sold the batch of ketamine that resulted in Mr. Perry's death on October 28th. Officers later searched defendant Sonia's home. During that search, they found what amounted to a drug-selling emporium. They found 80 vials of ketamine, thousands of pills containing methamphetamine, cocaine, bottles of Xanax and other illegally obtained prescription drugs, and drug-selling paraphernalia, including scales and ledgers. As I mentioned, the defendants in this case knew what they were doing was wrong. When they'd refer to the ketamine, they used coded language. They'd refer to it using terms such as, quote, Dr. Pepper, or quote, bots, or quote, cans. Also, defendants Placencia and Chavez, as medical doctors, knew full well this was not the proper way to administer ketamine, and they even talked about that in their exchanges. And defendant Sonia also knew that she was doing something that caused great risk to Mr. Perry. In fact, during this investigation, we learned that several years before, in 2019, defendant Sonia had sold ketamine to another customer. That person died the same day. And a family member of that person sent a message to defendant Sonia telling her the cause of death was ketamine. Nonetheless, defendant Sonia continued selling drugs, including the ketamine that ultimately killed Mr. Perry. That other victim was a person named Cody McGlory. He died in 2019. As a result of this investigation, we have filed a drug distribution charge related to the death of Mr. McGlory. After Mr. Perry died, these defendants tried to cover up what they had done. On October 28th, after reading news reports of Mr. Perry's death, defendant Sonia wrote a text message to defendant Fleming saying, quote, delete all our messages. Likewise, after Mr. Perry's death, defendant Placencia falsified medical records and notes to try to make it look like what he was doing was legitimate. It was not. We have filed numerous federal charges against the 5 defendants. These charges include conspiracy to distribute ketamine, distribution of ketamine resulting in death, maintaining drug-involved premises for that drug-selling emporium the defendant Sonia had, altering and falsifying records related to a federal investigation for those false medical notes and records that defendant Placencia made, and multiple other drug trafficking counts. Of course, the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The penalties these defendants face are very significant. With regard to defendant Placencia, the statutory maximum sentence he faces is 120 years in federal prison. Now, with regard to defendant Sonia, the statutory maximum she faces is life imprisonment. By filing these extensive and serious charges, we are sending a clear message. If you are in the business of selling dangerous drugs, we will hold you accountable for the deaths that you cause. This is nothing new for us. Since 2022, my office has filed over 60 cases against drug dealers who've caused the death of another person. These cases are known as death resulting cases. They are labor-intensive cases, and we work with our law enforcement partners, including ones represented here today, to bring those cases. Our office is a national leader in bringing those cases. They're very important because every victim's life counts. If you are in the drug selling business and you're selling dangerous drugs, you are playing roulette with other people's lives. just like the 5 defendants here did to Mr. Perry. Defendants nowadays are on full notice that the products they sell could result in the death of another person. Therefore, if you're in the drug business, and despite these risks you continue in the drug business, you are pushed by greed to gamble with other people's lives, be advised, we will hold you accountable. I want to thank our partners in this case, the Los Angeles Police Department, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. These investigators did a phenomenal job digging into the case, looking at every angle to develop a case, a strong case, against not only those who killed Mr. Perry, but also Mr. McLaury. I want to note that these cases are important and will continue to collaborate with our law enforcement partners to bring them, to ensure that justice is brought to every victim. And finally, let me thank the prosecutors responsible for the investigation and the prosecution of this case. Those are Assistant United States Attorneys Ian Yanello and Xiaohan Tsai. And now I'd like to introduce Chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, Dominic Choi.
All right. Good morning, and thank you, Martine. You know, while it's tragedy that brings us all here together, I'm happy to stand here knowing that these dangerous individuals are no longer on the streets and they won't be able to harm anyone else. The Los Angeles Police Department and our partners here today, we're committed to investigating all cases like this, and it's regardless of someone's background or socioeconomic status. And just with all of our cases, this investigation was done impartially. We let the facts drive this investigation, and those facts led us to a group of individuals who were responsible for supplying and distributing to Mr. Perry narcotics that led to his unfortunate and untimely death. The group standing here today, it's a prime example how our partnerships and our collaboration can yield meaningful results. I want to thank LAPD, our Robbery Homicide Division, who's standing in the back there, the U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada and his team, the DEA and her team, as well as the U.S. Postal Inspection Service and their team for their hard work, diligence, and real patience. Now, I know people think this took a long time, but there was a lot of work, a lot of investigative strategies that went into this to make sure that there is a solid case and that we can pursue this in the courts. Our relationship with our federal partners, it helps us ensure that these criminals will have meaningful sentences and be an example for anyone that is willing to risk or jeopardize distributing and supplying unlawful or narcotics to anyone. And I just really want people to know that that is the message. You cannot get away with this regardless of your background or socioeconomic status. Breaking the law is breaking the law, and you are dangerous and you are jeopardizing lives. So thank you all of my partners for being involved in this and bringing us to where we are at today. And at this time, I'd like to introduce DEA Administrator Ann Milgram.
Good morning. Today we announced charges brought against 5 individuals who together are responsible for the death of Matthew Perry. Each of the defendants played a key role in his death. They falsely prescribed, sold, or injected the ketamine that caused Matthew Perry's tragic death. In the United States, most forms of ketamine are only approved by the Food and Drug Administration for anesthesia. A nasal spray version is approved for treatment of depression, but only in a certified medical setting. Here, Matthew Perry sought treatment for depression and anxiety and went to a local clinic where he became addicted to intravenous ketamine. When clinic doctors refused to increase his dosage, he turned to unscrupulous doctors who saw Perry as a way to make quick money. Dr. Plasencia and Dr. Chavez violated the oath they took to care for their patients. Instead of do no harm, they did harm so that they could make more money. Without performing any medical evaluation or monitoring, they supplied Matthew Perry with large amounts of ketamine in exchange for large sums of money, charging Perry $2,000 for a vial that cost Dr. Chavez approximately $12. As Matthew Perry's ketamine addiction grew, he wanted more, and he wanted it faster and cheaper. That is how he ended up buying from street dealers who sold the ketamine that ultimately led to his death. In doing so, he followed the arc that we have tragically seen with many others, whose substance use disorder begins in a doctor's office and ends in the street. Perry turned to his street dealer, Eric Fleming, who sourced his ketamine from a drug trafficker known as the Ketamine Queen, Jasveen Sangha. The ketamine supplied by Sangha would ultimately be the dose that took Matthew Perry's life. Sangha knew that the ketamine she supplied could be deadly, since in 2019 she had sold ketamine to Cody McLaury, who died at the age of 33. But despite this knowledge, she continued to sell ketamine and methamphetamine throughout Los Angeles. Matthew Perry's journey began with unscrupulous doctors who abused their position of trust because they saw him as a payday, and it ended with street dealers who sold him ketamine in unmarked vials. The desperation that led Perry to these individuals was not met with help, as it should have been from the doctors, but instead it was met with exploitation. Exploitation by those who should have guided him toward help. This betrayal of trust is at the heart of this tragedy. Since 2023, DEA has investigated nearly 500 drug poisoning and overdose cases just like Matthew Perry's. We run a national initiative known as OD Justice, where we work with our state and local law enforcement partners to conduct investigations after someone has passed away. And it is important to note that the national model we today have in every 50 state across the United States is based on the work that started here in Los Angeles. We began this work with our partners in the Los Angeles Police Department and with other local police departments and sheriff's offices in California, in the Los Angeles area, and with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And today it stands as our national model for this critical work. Together, as part of OD Justice, we work to bring justice for the lives that have been lost and to stop others from dying. Regardless of the size or scope of a drug distribution network, the DEA will work nonstop to uncover and disrupt this illegal activity, and in this case, the deadly activity. I want to close by noting that Matthew Perry's death is not just a tragic overdose. After his 2020 book openly discussed his struggles with substance use disorder, Matthew Perry told podcast host Tom Power that he would prefer to be remembered for helping people rather than for his work on Friends as ChandlerBing. And so perhaps what has happened and the tragic details that we are discussing today can help others and save lives. I want to thank the Los Angeles Police Department, the United States Postal Inspection Service, and the United States Attorney's Office in the Central District of California for their tremendous partnership and their outstanding dedication to this case. I also have the privilege of serving every single day with the men and women of the DEA, and today I want to particularly recognize the outstanding work of our Los Angeles Field Division, as well as our diversion investigators who tirelessly worked on this case to bring justice to the victims and the families. Thank you. It's now my privilege to introduce Postal Inspector Shields.
Good morning, and again, welcome. I'd like to thank U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada for his tireless dedication to protecting the residents of the Central District of California and his partnership with the Postal Inspection Service. As the nation's oldest law enforcement agency, the Postal Inspection Service has had a long, proud, and successful history of combating criminals who misuse our nation's postal system and cause harm to our employees and customers. This is our mission. In this case, our agency, in partnership with the Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Drug Enforcement Administration, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, worked to seize, search, and analyze evidence that has culminated in arrests and a dismantling of the group that is responsible for providing the ketamine and the reported contributed to the death of Matthew Perry. In this case, these individuals knowingly and willfully distributed ketamine to Mr. Perry as he struggled to overcome addiction, which ultimately led to Mr. Perry's tragic demise. Unfortunately, every day in this country, families are grieving for their loved ones lost to drug overdoses. We want these families and the American public to know that the Postal Service will not be an unwitting accomplice to anyone using the U.S. mail to distribute illegal drugs or drug paraphernalia. The Inspection Service continues to work tirelessly to rid the mail of illicit drugs, fight drug trafficking and the associated violence, preserve the integrity of the mail, and most importantly, provide a safe environment to postal employees, customers, and the American public. The Postal Inspection Service is turning the tide against drug dealers. Detecting and stopping their shipments is only the beginning. Tracing illegal drugs back to the source and shutting them down is the ultimate mission. Once again, a tremendous thank you to our partners in federal and state and local law enforcement, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office, for their continued collaboration and hard work in support of this mission. Thank you.
I'll now do brief remarks in Spanish, and then we'll do questions and answers. Where are the Spanish language reporters? Hold up your hands. Okay, great. Hoy anunciamos cargos criminales federales en conexión con la muerte del actor Matthew Perry. Nuestra investigación ha revelado una gran red criminal responsable por el tráfico de ketamina en grandes cantidades. Esta red incluía a un asistente personal para el señor Perry, 2 médicos y una narcotraficante conocida como la reina de la ketamina. Hemos archivado cargos federales contra 5 acusados. Estos acusados vendieron ketamina al actor Matthew Perry y vendieron ketamina en grandes cantidades, 70 viales de ketamina. Estos acusados sabían que lo que hacían era muy peligroso. Hablaban en palabras codificadas. Estos acusados sabían que lo que estaban haciendo causaba un riesgo al señor Perry. Por supuesto, 2 de ellos eran doctores, médicos. Pero, sin embargo, estos acusados siguieron vendiendo ketamina al señor Perry. A estos acusados les importaba más el efectivo que la vida humana. Desde 2022, mi oficina ha archivado más que 60 casos contra narcotraficantes responsables por la muerte de otra persona. Estos casos son muy importantes porque la vida de cada víctima es importante. Con todos esos casos, como en este caso, mandamos un mensaje muy claro. No vamos a tolerar a los narcotraficantes que apuestan con las vidas de otras personas. We'll now do question and answer. Any questions? Yes.
My first question is, the person that found Matthew Perry in the hot tub, is that also one of the people who's being charged in this case? Is that the assistant?
I didn't hear that. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. The person, the assistant that's being charged in this case, is that also the person that found Matthew Perry in the hot tub?
So the personal assistant we charged is defendant Kenneth Iwamasa. He was the one live-in assistant for Mr. Perry. Yes. Yes.
The doctor, when the patient tragically died in 2019, did law enforcement look into that death when they found out the patient died?
I can't comment on that. What I can say is that through this investigation, we were able to connect defendant Sonia to that death in 2019 and file a charge related to that to vindicate the victim, Cody McClory.
Are there any details about this search
Yes.
warrant?
Can you talk a little bit about, and maybe this is for DA Administrator Milgram, but can you talk a little bit about the line between legitimate ketamine therapy treatment and was, Matthew Perry ever receiving legitimate ketamine therapy treatment, and then when did that cross over? Were the defendants
So let me say this. In this case, we are not talking about legitimate ketamine treatment. We're talking about two doctors who abused the trust they had, abused their licenses to put another person's life at risk. 5 defendants who, as I mentioned, knew what they were doing was wrong. In fact, one of them has sold ketamine that resulted in the death of another person in 2019. Nothing about what we see today was legitimate, and that's why we filed criminal charges.
Was he ever?
Yes.
Is this the beginning of an enforcement effort specifically against ketamine? I know you mentioned past cases, the 60 cases, and DEA mentioned it as well. Is there going to be a focus specifically on ketamine?
I think what you've seen is that this is not the beginning, but a continuation of an enforcement effort against synthetic drugs of all kinds. Synthetic drugs, ketamine, but also methamphetamine, fentanyl, are killing people each and every day. We in law enforcement and with the U.S. Attorney's Office are on a campaign to address this and send a message that if you sell drugs, it results in the death of another person, the consequences will be severe.
Any details
Disculpe,
about
en
the search
español,
warrant?
¿nos puede decir de los doctores que fueron detenidos?
Hay 2 doctores que son los acusados en este caso, el doctor Plasencia y el doctor Chávez. Los 2 están acusados en este caso. El doctor Plasencia fue arrestado hoy en la mañana. El doctor Chávez ya ha sido preso y también ya ha declarado su culpabilidad.
Any details about the search warrant as to when it was executed, besides the drugs, any other items that may have been seized or recovered?
So with regard to defendant Sanya, that search warrant was executed earlier this year. During that search, as I mentioned, we found not just 80 vials of ketamine, thousands of pills containing methamphetamine, cocaine, bottles of Xanax, and other illegally prescribed drugs, and drug-selling paraphernalia. As I mentioned, it was a drug-selling emporium. You have your hand up in the middle.
Yes, Nikki Smith with Entertainment Tonight. Are there any other celebrities involved in this investigation, and if so, who?
I've mentioned the defendants in this case. We have 5 defendants. The lead defendants are defendants Josephine Sanya, Salvador Plasencia. We also have defendants Mark Chavez, another medical doctor. We have defendant Kenneth Iwamasa and defendant Eric Fleming. We look at the evidence, we see where that goes. We don't charge people based on whether they're celebrities or not celebrities. We charge them based on the evidence.
I think what my colleague here was getting at before is in the autopsy report that was made public about his death, there were 2 physicians who were listed as being involved in Mr. Perry's treatment prior to his death. One of them was involved in what appeared to be legitimate therapeutic use of ketamine. Is there any indication that the people who were doing the off-label recreational use were connected with the legitimate therapy he was getting at any point? And
So what I'll tell you is, before we get to your second, what I'll tell you is that in our cases, we go where the evidence leads us. We also respect patient privacy. What I will say is an autopsy was conducted. That autopsy showed Mr. Perry died as a result of the acute effects of ketamine. I won't go into further detail of Mr. Perry's personal history.
Okay.
Yes.
And then were any of the pharma charged on your radar prior to Perry's overdose?
I can't comment on that. What I will say is the investigation is ongoing, but what we're announcing today are serious federal charges against these 5 defendants, supported by an extensive investigation.
Sir, can you clarify the relationship?
This woman has been patiently have her hand up. Yes.
Yes, Chavez was detained. When was he detained, and was it related to this case as well?
Defendant Chavez is a defendant in this case.
Right.
We filed this morning a plea agreement for defendant Chavez. So he's already not entered, but we have a filed plea agreement for him. 2 other defendants, defendant Iwamasa, have also signed plea agreements. That plea agreement has been entered. And defendant Fleming has signed a plea agreement. That plea agreement has been entered. As I mentioned, the 2 lead defendants in this case are defendants Plasencia and defendant Sanya, who were arrested this morning. Yes, sir. No. There's the patient man behind you. Yes, sir.
Fiscal, ¿nos puede identificar a los 5 detenidos y nos puede relacionar cómo comenzó la investigación con la vena de la ketamina del 2019?
Sí, hay 5 acusados y ya nombré los acusados. Hoy en la mañana 2 fueron arrestados. Fue la acusada Sanya y el acusado Plasencia, que fue un doctor médico.
Sir,
Yes.
Yeah, there were reports this morning that the investigation could have uncovered other celebrities who may have been buying from this same network. Is that accurate? Can you give us any sense of the customers?
So I can't comment on reports that are out there, their accuracy or inaccuracy. What I can tell you are the facts that we developed through our investigation. Those facts are what I've related to you this morning. Yes?
You mentioned the queen of ketamine out of North Hollywood. What does that actually mean? How big was the network of people to whom she was selling narcotics, and specifically ketamine?
What I can say about defendant Sonia, known as the ketamine queen, was that she was a major source of supply for ketamine to others, as well as Mr. Perry. I think the fact that we searched her house and found a drug-selling emporium, including 80 vials of ketamine, would strongly suggest she was selling to many other individuals.
Can you give a number, dozens, tens?
I cannot, unfortunately, number. No.
Any evidence as far as this has gone outside?
Let me, the gentleman there in the back.
Extra TV, what has been Matthew's parents' or family's reaction to the news coming out today?
So I won't comment on specific statements made by victims' families. We value confidentiality. What I will say is that the work of our office is victim-driven. We work with victims, including their families, each and every day, not just on this case, but on all our cases, including the over 60 death-resulting cases I mentioned earlier. We have been in communication, and I will leave it at that. Yes?
Hello, sir. Were all the defendants American citizens, and where were they sourcing their drugs?
What I can say is that all the defendants, actually I can't comment on citizenship at this time. I can't comment on the sourcing either. I've given you the facts in terms of the drug selling. Yes, sir.
With regard to the death of Mr. McClure, the other victim, you see that his death was also a ketamine overdose. Did that investigation into his death link the investigation with Perry, or was it only after the death of Perry that you realized the link with Mr. McClure's death?
Sure. It was through the investigation in this case, as the investigators did a thorough job, followed every lead, pulled every string to see what had occurred. They learned about the extent of defendant Sonia's criminal conduct and learned about the sale in 2019. And because of that investigation, we have filed a charge related to the death of victim McClure. And that's important because we want to vindicate all victims who suffer these types of tragedies.
Quick follow-up.
I'll do 2 more questions.
Quick follow-up. Do you have any reason to believe that this so-called queen of ketamine is linked to any more deaths? Are there any more investigations and any more possible that she could be linked to?
I think, as I mentioned, we've linked her to sales of ketamine, which resulted in at least 2 deaths. We searched her home. We found a drug-selling emporium. I can't comment. I can't speculate on things such as what you're suggesting. I will say, in this case, she is facing very significant federal charges, including a charge that carries a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence. Yes, sir.
Were these 5 continuing to sell ketamine or other drugs after Perry's death?
I can't comment on that in terms of where they were selling.
No, in terms of afterwards. Were they
What I can say is that we searched the home of one of the defendants following Mr. Perry's death. She had 80 vials of ketamine, thousands of pills of methamphetamine, cocaine, bottles of Xanax. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Can you just clarify the relation, really? Did the doctors work with the street dealers specifically, or was that a separate sale of ketamine, or were they connected?
So it's the last question, because you've been so patient. We charge a conspiracy here. The conspiracy is against all 5 defendants for selling ketamine to Mr. Perry. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The press release is out. It's online. We've emailed it. It's on social media. So.
Holy shit balls, you guys, isn't that crazy? I just heard about this the other day. I sent a couple links to a couple of my friends, and I knew that there was a federal investigation involving Matthew Perry's death. And then all of a sudden today, I see this live press conference indicting 5 people. Now, I would like to have a discussion because the court system in Canada and the US are totally different. So we don't have like a grand jury and all that. So like I need to understand so I can understand how your justice, well, quote unquote, justice system works. So if I understand correctly, a grand jury is like peers who hear like a brief synopsis of the facts of the case, and they decide if whether or not there's enough to go to like trial to charge these people. Is that correct? Um, and if that is correct, doesn't that like when you have a press conference and you put out all of this information, especially regarding like a very, very public figure, not that I'm trying to get them off, because I think if they're guilty and they killed him unknowingly in some way, shape, or form through their actions or being involved in retrieving these drugs, because he was receiving it as a treatment at one time, because it is a viable option for depression administered in a medical clinic. So what happened is he got hooked onto this ketamine. It can also be treated for PTSD. Believe it or not, I actually looked into it, but I thought, no, I don't want to chance it, right? But I guess what happened is, I guess like every other drug, you build up a tolerance, and the doctor started refusing to give him the dosage that he wanted. So instead of going to like a clinical setting, which is the legal way of dealing with this, he had one of his personal assistants and one of the doctors who in 2019 was had administered the same pharmaceutical that we're talking about here, and another person had died. So now there's 2 deaths relating to that. So how they could say, and there's screenshots out there of his personal assistant being involved as the go-between between this like 4 other people. It was a network, like they'll call it, all these buzzwords and fancy it up. So let's call it a big giant ass distribution ring, like they'll say. And like, what is a drug emporium? Okay. But my question is how does this information out there, with him being such a public figure, allow them to have a fair trial, is my question. Not that I believe anything about the legal system is fair in any way, shape, or form, but I'm asking a genuine question because it works completely different here in Canada. So, for instance, in Canada, when you have an open investigation, you are not allowed to discuss anything about the case at all. Um, and you shouldn't. And some people are under very strict guidelines, not to speak. Some of them, it could be part of their bail conditions not to speak. But I'm just curious because I love learning about other people's, ways and how things work in other countries. And like I've always said to you guys, like, your American laws scare me, okay? Because one of these charges is conspiracy, so that's one of them that scare me, and so did the RICO Act, okay? So, like, if you're involved in any of those things, one of the guys are facing 120 years. Now, let's get real, okay? Like, this is what I mean about your draconian things. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that these people don't deserve to go in jail. But who honestly lives to be 120 years old? Now, why do they give such sentences? Is that because they want, like, even if you are innocent and you fight your case and exhaust all your appeals and stuff, is that so much time would go by that you would still serve a sentence? Or can someone explain as an American the reason behind that? Because I'm very curious. Like, I don't know. That's why I'm asking these questions, because we don't have like the grand jury and all that kind of stuff. It's like the prosecution here in Canada decides if there's enough to go forward. And usually when the feds have their eye on you, whether you're guilty or not, they have the resources and the numbers. And, they also have all the establishments and run and own all of those. Our news even works differently in Canada than it does in yours. I know you guys have heard me speak many times about the Online Streaming Act, Bill C-11 and Bill C-63. Those are a direct violation of our human rights, our God-given rights. In Angel's chat last night, I've seen people talking about the Patriot Act. And if I understand that correctly, that's similar to something in Canada that was once called the War Measures, which has now been renamed the Emergencies Act. And that's what they declared during the Freedom Convoy. And they stripped us of every single what we thought was an ironclad constitutional God-given right. And it's a very interesting time in Canada because there are people that are legally challenging it through the legal system, and it's going to be years of litigation. But we're going to find out at the end of all of this exactly how strong this document is. And it's a very precedent-setting case in Canada. It's never been challenged in this way before. But again, you know, like the media, the mainstream media in Canada is bought and paid for by the federal government. And that's why in Canada we have now resorted to live streaming, because you cannot manipulate the footage. Okay, you're not being paid by the federal government to discuss and don't you dare deviate from those talking points, yo, because you won't be getting your paycheck. Okay, you're gonna have to eat soup on those days because they just won't pay for that. So ketamine is a horse tranquilizer, actually, but for a therapeutic sense, it can be used in the treatment of depression and PTSD. It's like an unconventional, if it's done in a medical setting under the doctor's care, it is a viable option for treatment for those that are resistant to treatment for PTSD. And believe it or not, the reason why I know that is because it's something that I actually looked into. But then when I realized, you know, like what it is, I don't want to risk getting like hooked on it, right? And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, pills are not the answer. Those are a band-aid solution to a gaping wound. So again, I'll repeat myself in saying that you need to treat the wound. You cannot just put a band-aid over a gaping hole that needs stitches and say, off you go. Because it just doesn't work like that. But if it was up to the doctors, they would have you drooling and basically sitting at home collecting a disability. And maybe that's for you, but it's not for someone like me. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying what works best for me in my life. And like some people are not able to work as a result of it, and I struggle with it. I'm not going to lie to you, that is part of PTSD. And you know, I have been going for like extra doses of therapy, and I can honestly say for the first time in 10 fucking years that I got this, and I mean it. Like, I feel different. I don't know what the magic touch was. I've been going through so many counselors, and all the help and programs that I found have been through my own doing. They are not interested in finding you any sort of treatment, in my opinion, as the patient and having gone through this. They have 3-year waiting lists, but I have private insurance through my employer, and it covers the payments for that. And when you know, a 3-year waiting list suddenly becomes, we have an opening on Tuesday at 1:30. Would you like to come? When you start paying, right? But I don't care, because if it helps me and it gives me a better quality of life, then I'll pay a friggin' zillion dollars, okay? And so far, I can't believe, I'm still in shock myself that it's working. But I feel better than I have physically, mentally, and emotionally in a long damn time. And I'm afraid to say those words out loud, because it's almost like when you put that out into the universe, I almost hear the universe saying back, ha ha ha, hold my beer, watch this, bitch. But no, you don't get to fuck with me anymore, life. Okay, I'm done with that. And we're moving on from that. It's time to move on. It's time to heal. Okay, it's time to stop fighting each other. We are the people, okay? We are not supposed to be enemies. And if there is a discussion, and I don't care what the topic of conversation is, but stop. You need to deprogram these horrible, tyrannical, psychological warfare moves that they've done on purpose as a reason and a means to divide. And at some point, if the people don't come together, you're going to end up fighting each other. And I think we're closer to saying that now than we ever have in the history of anything I've seen in my lifetime. And it's not something any of us want. But the way to combat that is to start lowering the temperature. Start having adult discussions, even about stuff that you don't agree on. And you don't need to resort to name calling and insults, because that tells me when that is your go-to move, and you offer up no information, no data, no tangible evidence to support your facts of what you're saying, and you just resort to name calling and insults, that tells me that you don't have a very strong case. Because if we can't even get out, like, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are on. It's not about politics for me, and never fucking has been. Okay. It's a bone of contention with everybody. Like it used to be the Canadian rule. Don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. But you are able to have adult civil conversations, even with people that you disagree with, if you have an open mind and aren't so quick to go off at the mouth. Now, I'm not criticizing anybody about having that Tourette sometimes, because sometimes it comes out of me too, and I admit it. I can swear like a trucker, and I apologize if my cursing offends anybody. That's environmental for me. It's because of how I was raised, where I work, everything. And I mean no harm by using foul words, but that's the worst thing about me. So if the worst thing about me is that I say fuck too much, I apologize. But there's people out there that do a lot worse, okay? So let's get that away. And if you can't have a conversation without using labels and insults and name calling, then you don't have a very strong case. But at some point, you're going to have to be mature about this, because I'm really sick of watching you kids throw sand at each other in the sandbox, okay? Our lives are at stake. Our futures are at stake. If you have kids or grandkids, they are at stake. So no matter what you believe in or what side you choose, because for me, I don't care about any of them. To me, they're all the same bird, right? Birds of a feather. It's a matter of picking the lesser of two evils. And at some point, the people are going to have to come together and say, okay, let's look at this from a different perspective and say, it's not about politics. It's not about who you support or who you don't support. It's about people. It's about how their policies are going to affect your everyday to day life. It is about the quality of life that we are living. The record inflation, like groceries have gone up over 50%. Okay. I mean, these are desperate times. And when people get themselves into desperate times, they do desperate things. Okay. And I don't want to see that happen. And we're getting to a very critical juncture in this world. And let me just say that if things go sideways in the US, you watch how it fucking blows up everywhere around the world, metaphorically speaking, of course. I am not encouraging or inciting anything. I just feel like you can only be in a pressure cooker for so long. And I don't care if you're a Trump supporter or if you're not. I'm not talking about politics, but the fact that he sat down and had a very logical conversation with Elon Musk, who is the most influential, richest, most powerful man in the world, and lowered the temperature of everybody who is ready. Like, we're ready to go. We'll roll at dawn. Like, that needs to come down 100 degrees. And we need to start talking in real time about real people, about how this inflation is making a person who makes $50,000 to $60,000 a year, which at one time would have been considered middle income. We are now working poor, and that's a fucking problem. And then when you see them not willing to engage with the people, because I can't imagine my leader doing something like that, and I don't even want to call him a leader, but for the sake of this video, that's the word I'll use. But he doesn't address the people. He has very scripted, very biased news media organizations. Some he won't even allow in. He will certainly never address the people head on. He will not talk about real issues. They talk about the same damn things that they've been talking about for 3 years. Like, he is a toddler. He needs a bottle and a rattle. You need to stop forcing things down our throat. Whatever the next current thing is, like, I don't force my will onto others. I don't want it forced onto me. So take the politics out of it. Take the representative out of it. Look at, how is your quality of life right now? Imagine if you were a single person trying to make it in this world when your rent is almost as much as your gross income, and then have a car payment on top of it. And everything else. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about a pressure cooker, that's when I talk about these things, I don't articulate myself in a way all the time that is as transparent as some people might like, because I am a private person about my personal stuff. And, I realize, a couple years back there was a problem, but I didn't know how to talk about it because it's not something I've ever been through. It's not something I've ever seen before. It caused a lot of division, and I lost a lot of friends over it. And then I got to the point where it's like, okay, well, you're on your own. Save yourself. Like, I can't save you, nor is it my job to. I tried to, but now you're just a fucking road bump in the way. So now it's time to find a common ground, and we need to join together as we the people and show these friggin' toddlers and, you know, the other guy who needs a life alert and a compass, and even with help getting off the stage, he still gets turned around 3 times, like, do the hokey pokey. He don't even know where the fuck he is. And these people are leaders. Like, what is happening here? And if you dare talk about things like this video might go down, but go ahead, YouTube, because I'll show you my friggin' constitution. And I have the freedom of expression. I have the freedom of press. I have the freedom to associate with anybody I want. It doesn't, and on none of those does it have the caveat, unless we agree with your cause or unless we support this. I could care less. You live what works for you. You do what's best for you. But I don't believe in these blanket statements and a one size fits all, because we are not the fucking same. And these people are too far removed from reality to be able to even humble themselves for just a moment to understand that this is so easy to fix, but they're too into their narcissistic head and it's up their ass that they don't know how to fix it. And it's so simple. And it's disgraceful as a matter of fact, that this behavior has been not only accepted from people on a world stage, but also they come at us in Canada for our freedom of speech and freedom to protest, and all of our human rights and freedoms, and our charter and our constitution has been essentially toilet paper. And you know, and then they start scrubbing the internet and stuff like that. Like, I mean, only guilty people hide stuff, okay? If you have nothing to hide, you hide nothing. So knock it off with your scrubbing the internet, because we all have everything backed up on backups. I'm on multiple devices, okay? I'm on my 5th channel. So this is no new news to me. Now they're just doing it to everybody and letting you know that they're doing it when I've known all along. So welcome to my world. They're making, like, they want to make it like so you could spend life in prison for thought crimes on your social media. Like, you can't even make this stuff up. And the reason why, I couldn't figure out the reason why they keep targeting our censorship and our media and everything else. And then I realized it's because they won't be able to control the narrative. And when you take away the power and the control from a narcissist, you send them into a tailspin that they don't even know how to handle, because they are surrounded by yes men. They have no idea what it's like to live as an average friggin' peasant, and they have no idea what it's doing to our everyday lives. And the last couple of years have been the absolute most difficult of my life, and I'm proud to say that I've overcome it now. And I can honestly say that and fucking mean it. Is it something that's going to be something that I'm going to have to continue to work on throughout my life? Yeah, it is. Because, like, I'm old, and, you know, I don't believe in the saying you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think you can, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of mindful inner dialogue changing, and a lot of foo-foo shit. But there's a lot of merit to this foo-foo shit, and I'm seeing it. So I also have some other good news on a separate subject altogether, an update on my eyes. I do have to have surgery, but I'm not going blind. And in fact, after the surgery, I'm most likely going to have, she says I have 20/20 vision now, but I know I need reading glasses. But they have to do one eye at a time. But once both eyes are done, I'm gonna not even need reading glasses. So I'm not going blind. So again, do not take things at face value. Okay? Just because somebody says something or feels a certain type of way, it doesn't make it true. And for 2 months, I walked around thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go to sleep and wake up and not be able to see anything. And people need to be held accountable for that shit. Because, like, you're taking years off my life, and I can't afford to give any more. Like, I'm a cat. I've got 9 lives. I've used up 56. Okay, so stop messing with me. It's somebody else's turn now. But I've reversed my type 2 diabetes as well. I've lost 100 pounds. I went from a size 22 to a size 8. I no longer have diabetes. And so again, do not accept at face value what people are telling you. And when they're pushing all these drugs on you, and this is the only way, no, it's not. If you're type 2, it can be reversed through diet and exercise and lifestyle change. You need to not take people at their word, okay? We're not hanging out with the cleavers in the fucking 70s or 80s anymore. People are car salesmen, they're greasy, they're snake selling people. Oh God, stupid kids around. See what I mean? I'm so glad I didn't have kids, like little luggages carrying around playing with the horn. Like demon spawn. But yeah, you don't need to take people's shit. You don't need to take people's word for it just because they say it. Because people make mistakes, sometimes unknowingly, and sometimes maybe they do know. Who knows? I'm not a mind reader. But all I know is if it doesn't sound right to me and I get stuck on it, like I get stuck on stupid shit in my brain. And if it doesn't register, I get stuck on it literally. And that's when I'll start asking a million questions. And the reason why I do that is because I have ADD. So my brain works different than yours, okay? I'm a visual learner. I need to see things. Everybody learns differently. And I just get stuck on stupid things because if it doesn't make sense, if logic and common sense do not prevail and I cannot grasp what you're telling me, then you're trying to feed me a line of bullshit. And I'm not buying it, okay? I'm selling shovels. So take your bullshit and sell it somewhere else. But on that note, nothing but great news to report. Check out this live. I apologize for the first one. It's very difficult when you're trying to run a live through your phone. So this was the first time I was actually able to screen share while I was on my phone. So when I set up my first live and made the announcement, I was like, I had practiced and everything. I was like, okay, so I had set it on unlisted because like I didn't want to look like an idiot for one time, just once out here on YouTube, on the YouTube streets, yo. And then when I went live, I couldn't edit the settings to change it to public. So I stopped that one. I will delete it. And this is the one, this is obviously the one with the information. But now that I know how to do this, like, look at me go, you guys. Fucking Edward Snowden, here I come, bud. Move right over. Taking your spot, okay? So here's my final thoughts of the day is if it doesn't make sense and it gets stuck in your brain and your brain is just saying, wait a minute, something's not right, or your gut. I'm a firm believer in follow your gut. Something inside of you is going to say, ding, 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 there's warning bells here. Now, that is something inside that people ignore a lot of times. And I learned a long time ago to listen to that, even when I don't know why. Because it has kept me alive in situations that I simply should not have even be sitting here talking to you, but I am because I followed my gut. So whatever works for you, whatever type 6 sense you have, whether it's your gut, your head, if something is not registering with you and it's not sitting right, then go talk to somebody else. Get a different point of view. And might I suggest to the people in the back that have a hard time being an adult and having mature conversations because society is veered away from that so much, then break it down and start just having a common ground and go from there. It never was about politics with me. Okay? Maybe one day I'll work up the nerve to tell you the real fucking truth about what happened. But for right now, I'm on a journey of healing that I really don't want to have a setback. So for now, I'm not ready. I know that when the time is right, I will know, and I will share that with you when I'm ready. But there was a reason for my anger. There was a reason for my frustration, for my cause for concern, my confusion. And when I explain it to you one day, you'll totally understand and look back and be like, holy shit, that's what it was. And I didn't even know it at the time. So sometimes it takes a little bit of distance to gain clarity. So that's where I'm at right now. And if you can't be kind, at least try to do better than you did yesterday. So that's all I've got for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please share this one out because this is like breaking news. This happened today. And I'm going to leave it here. There's so much more I could talk about. I might do another live later, but I want to separate the two. So please share this video out. Please like it. I never asked for likes. Maybe I should start doing that because the YouTube, we have this love and hate thing, and like it helps for the algorithm. So like, comment, share, all that, whatever stuff you tell people, do all that stuff. And don't be an asshole. So it was great that you all joined me. I really enjoyed hanging out with you. And now that I know how to do this on my phone, holy shit, I'm a force to be reckoned with. Watch out, yo. I'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys.